Well, shoot. Give me a second, because I apparently made some mistakes with my OBS. Goofed it a little bit, and now I have to like redo everything. Yeah, this looks. Yeah, this is fine. So where's the making tea? Yeah, this is supposed to be like here. I'll put over here this time. Yeah, I made some changes, and apparently I goofed everything. I'm gonna have to look into that. Off stream, yeah, you see here, we have this. Well, we can try messing with this. Yeah, I messed with some I messed with some property or other, and oops, I like goofed everything. So trying to fix all that. But welcome back, everyone who's here. We are armed once more with some hot tea. Anyone who's familiar with my girlfriend knows that I like me some hot teas. I got some more of that Boston tea. Hey, Galit, thanks for coming. I'm gonna. So I guess the plan for today, I want to do a little bit more, like a couple of smaller things. And after the 4 hours we were at it yesterday, I mean, I felt it was necessary, and I hope it was valuable to people watching. But I don't need to do that again today. So I guess the plan will be we'll watch that follow-up video what that person seems to think that Neil deGrasse Tyson should have said. We'll go over the Trump Fox interview as I mentioned yesterday, but didn't want to get into. So we'll do all that. Just give me 1 second. I do want to mess with. I figured out how to get YouTube chat on here, but I wanted to change a little bit of. Like, wanted to change the scaling, but it seems I can't. I can't really do that. All right. Well, we'll put this here, and we'll hope. Maybe I can. Ooh, I can mess with this way. Haha. Wait, no, that's not. That's not good. That looks really bad, actually. Or is it? Well, we'll leave it there, and I'll mess with it more off stream. But I wanted the YouTube chat to show up on on my stream. Give people a view of what it looks like. And yeah, it looks all right. It's a little ill-defined. I'll add a background to that afterwards. Off stream. I was starting to do this like right before I started stream, and I should have done it well before. So I didn't want to be late. So here we are. Now your chats will show up. If they start to be, well, inappropriate, I'm gonna start having to ban people or just take the chat off the screen. But that also being said, let's follow up on yesterday. So if for anyone who wasn't here or doesn't recall, we watched this. It's closer to an interview than in style than a debate, but it ends up being confrontational. So I don't know. It's kind of a debate between Del Bigtree and Neil deGrasse Tyson, wherein we learned Del Bigtree loves to lie and be dishonest about everything he can to push his agenda, uh, and was openly lying about basically everything he said. But Neil, well, he's an astrophysicist. He's not a medical expert. He's not a vaccine expert. He maybe did a little bit of looking into this stuff for his work in an upcoming documentary called Shot in the Arm, which I am interested in seeing when it comes out. But he's not an expert in this, and so one mentioned the fact, two kind of checked out when he realized how dishonest Dell was being, and three didn't necessarily have the opportunity to have good answers. So I'm curious what this person has to say about what Neil should have said. I don't know anything about this channel, so I don't know what to expect here. Let's see if we can't make the chat a little bit bigger. It's, everywhere that the screen is.
Hey, I'm Dr. Wilson. I'm a PhD molecular biologist, and
Oh,
welcome to another COVID debunking video.
cool. All right.
So,
I'm glad he
recently,
knows.
Neil
He's supposed to
deGrasse
be
Tyson
someone who knows
went
what
on to
he's
Del
talking about.
Bigtree's show to debate him about vaccine topics. Most of you probably know who Neil deGrasse Tyson is. He's an astrophysicist and one of the most famous science communicators of today. But who is Del Bigtree?
That
Well,
was what I was
let me
asking.
tell you.
Oh,
Del
good. We're
Bigtree
getting
has
some
been
background.
spreading disinformation about every vaccine for many, many years. and he does it in a televangelist-like way.
So that's a little bit at odds of what we found, because we just saw that apparently he was. Oh, he says years actors from 2003. Okay, it's just the organizations he's been a part of have been since 2016. Oh, so then like the quote unquote like whistleblower he's talking about, like he was already. It's not like that person convinced him. He was already at this from 2003, and at that point you have to know it's exactly the Wakefield stuff, because there wasn't even COVID. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. This is corroborating all the things I thought about this. Whoops, I still have this open. Still, go watch this video. If you haven't, watch it. It's in. I have a link in my last video. You can go search it. This vaccines and autism video measured response. Very, very, very good. Go watch it.
I call him the Alex Jones of the anti-vaccine world.
Yeah,
But
I can
just
see
to give
that.
you a
I
crystal
wanted
clear
to compare him
picture
to
of the
Alex
kind of
Jones
person
during that interview, but I was like, we'll see if that's appropriate.
Del Bigtree is, he is the kind of person who does publicity stunts like this, where he wore a yellow Star of David at an anti-vaccine rally
Ooh.
in order to compare himself as an anti-vaxxer to Jewish people in Nazi Germany.
Wow.
Yeah, the guy is a real piece of work.
Yeah.
And we have
Yeah, I got
Neil
that.
deGrasse Tyson, arguably the most famous science communicator of today, going on to his show to debate a topic that he is not an expert in. While I appreciate what Neil is trying to do and a lot of the things that he said here, ultimately I think that there are a lot of things that he should have done better. And so I'm going to be talking about in this video my opinion on how he should have approached a conversation like this, and also the facts that he definitely should have brought up to smack down Del Bigtree's god-awful claims that are so easily proven wrong, it's laughable.
I will give, like, for charitability to Tyson here, he was in a position where he didn't necessarily have the access to the information he would have needed, and to have it all on his mind would be kind of unreasonable, given that you're not necessarily sure which avenue a whack job like Del Bigtree is going to come at you with from. Like he's not going to know that he's going to list these specific quotes from these scientists or whatever else, and he didn't have the access to it. So like we're going to look at this as more given the opportunity to say what should have been said, what should Tyson have said, as opposed to he fucked up by not saying this.
So let's jump right in and start with my opinion on how this should have been approached. As you can tell from Del Bigtree's publicity stunts, like the Yellow Star of David thing,
God,
he is not an honest person. He is not here to have an honest conversation.
Correct.
He is here to push an agenda.
And that should have been, by the way, like that should have been obvious just from watching that conversation. You should have been very clear to everyone watching how dishonest Del Bigtree is. I'm surprised that someone in my chat was saying that he seems really honest. Like, no, he's very clearly willing to say and do whatever for his agenda. Like, I mean, come on, like the Star of David thing. How is that not a giant red flag? Yeah, you should already know, even without knowing about him beforehand. But it's good to have that corroboration.
And that agenda is anti-vaccine rhetoric. He does not care about the facts. He does not care about the science. He cares about his image and the propaganda that his platform is putting out.
Yep.
So if you're going to go on his show to debate, which I do not recommend, I think that you need to be prepared. You have to know his talking points, and you have to be ready to address them. Neil should.
This is the difficulty, right? This is the thing you have to do to overcome the power imbalance that the situation was creating, right? This just goes back to what we were talking about. Like, you can't. It's not a fair level conversation between two people with equal power in the conversation. It is a situation where Del has way more power to do what he wants to do. He can interrupt. He can go on at length. He has access to information that's not to hand because he has his staff or whatever, and Neil just doesn't. And so in order to combat that, like Dr. Wilson here is saying, you have to have a lot of information ready for any avenue of attack that you can come up. And that's kind of unreasonable generally, but it's just kind of necessary when you're dealing with someone like this.
Should have been as prepared as possible to achieve the one goal that I think is really worth achieving in this kind of situation, and that is to show that his opponent, Del Bigtree, has absolutely no clue what he is talking about. Don't let him just rapid fire off nonsense.
Well,
You have to
you
nail
don't
him
have the
down to a specific.
tools. You don't. He didn't have the ability to really stop. I mean, he can't like shout over the host on his own show. Not really. Like maybe would like, and Neil did try to interject when Dell would go on at length, and he was like, no, no, we'll get back to it, and then he'd just talk for another 3 minutes before asking a very simple question, as though that's where we can start talking about stuff. So like, I agree, you have to do that, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's possible.
Specific claim, go through the evidence with him, make him explain the data that supports his claim, and then you will easily show that he is clueless. That
Yeah, force him to answer hard questions. Things like, notice he kept alluding to the harm that's being done, but wasn't interested in prompting what that harm was. Got to press him on stuff like that. What harm? And then when he says stuff like, "Oh, autism," press him on like, "Oh, so you think risking death is worse than being autistic?" Like, point out his bigotry, and you can, that is something that's, seems a little uncivil, but like, even as Neil was pointing out, the guy was like so furious the veins were popping out of his head because he was like so stoked on his own dishonesty. He was like rocking a half chub. So yeah, it's fine, you don't necessarily have to be civil with someone who's being dishonest like that.
he is making stuff up. By doing that, you're not going to change his mind. He's not going to admit defeat. No. And probably a lot of his most loyal followers will not either.
True.
But you will show an audience that this person pushing anti vaccine propaganda had no idea what they were talking about.
And this is the risk a little bit of platforming that we've covered before. I think when we talked about the Sarah Zed video, like Neil deGrasse Tyson has a lot of people who like him, like has a lot of fans, right? And they're probably coming. They might be coming to watch this show, and some number of them are susceptible to being convinced by the dishonesty of Del Bigtree. And that's a harm. That's a harm done. You're exposing them to propagandistic lies. Whereas if you do it, however, the trade-off is there's a kind of the risk reward effectively if you effectively hold your position, and like it's hard, you're right. You have to do a lot of work. You have to know what you're doing to really like defeat him in the free marketplace of ideas. TM. His some amount of his audience is amenable to argument and evidence. Some amount of them are not, just like so wrapped up in their anti-vaccine fervor that they're unwilling to listen to the actual truth of the matter, the actual evidence that's at hand, and will be put off when they are made aware of how much Dell is lying to them.
And that is worth doing in these kinds of debates. But I don't think Neil was prepared to do any of that.
No, he wasn't.
And so
it's hard
here
to be,
I'm going to explain the kinds of things he should have said to Del Bigtree when he was rapid firing off some nonsense points.
I have been like really charitable talking about what Neil deGrasse Tyson did in that debate, because obviously a lot of the stuff was set up against him. But the one thing I will impugn him for is being there not ready for this kind of conversation, given that he should know who Del Bigtree is, right? He's featured prominently in that documentary that Tyson is helping to work on. You should at the very least be aware of who you're dealing with and know that you have to be ready for this kind of thing. And if you're not, you don't have to accept the interview. You don't have to be there.
So this conversation was almost 2 hours long. I'm not going to cover the whole thing, but I'm going to start at the beginning and cover the highlights. So let's get started on that. Let's start with this clip that has gone viral, where Neil and Del are talking about scientific consensus around COVID vaccines. But before that clip that went viral, Neil actually explained what a scientific consensus was. So I think that's worth listening to.
A scientific consensus is not about opinions. It's about results published, peer-reviewed, published results of experiments. And we speak of the consensus of those experiments. If they lean in...
I will say, this was bugging me all of yesterday, and it's a very minor point, but Neil deGrasse Tyson actually looks and sounds a lot like someone I know. As a friend of my dad's, and it throws me off constantly. I'll have to remind myself, like, that's not, they're like they just look very, very similar and sound very similar, and just like remind me in vibe of each other, even though they're very different people. And it's just a little bit weird to hear him talk at length, and that was getting me all of yesterday, and it's gonna get me a bit here today.
One direction, it is in your interest to lean
follow
with
that direction.
Correct. I think for some of those quotes, I said trust the scientist.
Yeah.
Yes, if the scientist is representing a consensus. If they're isolated, it's like, what's going on
Here, Neil is absolutely right. A scientific consensus is based on the totality of the data. If you have an international community of scientists all studying a particular topic, they're all going to be making observations and doing experiments to answer particular questions in their field. And if all these different observations and experiments are all pointing in one direction, then that's a scientific consensus. And that consensus will only change if new and compelling data change that consensus, and the community will change with it. Scientists are perfectly capable of acknowledging new data and following it. What is not going to change a scientific consensus are a few lone cranks who go on national television to spout whatever flashy ideas that news network wants to air at that time.
Correct. And while Del Bigtree was interested in framing these people as like the truth tellers that are being oppressed and like their ideas will shake the ground, often they're just wrong. And if they weren't just these cranks, they would be putting out peer-reviewed, repeated, demonstrable results as opposed to screaming about how no one will listen to them on national TV. Like that's not what scientists tend to do, actually.
In order for ratings or clicks or whatever they want to achieve.
And shilling their
But none of
books.
this gets through to Dell. Instead, Dell just
Oh,
does
'cause he's
what
not
science
listening. He doesn't care.
deniers always do.
Okay.
They prop up fake experts in order to create an illusion that the consensus is being sufficiently challenged by a radical, creative minority of scientists.
I wonder if Dr. Wilson like knows who these people are, and we'll get into that. I don't really care, and it's not really necessary, but I am curious if that's where he'll go at some point, and like break down like, all right, let's pause, let's go through who all these people are. If I had the patience to do it, I would have done it myself, but I already knew we were going to be at it for quite a long time, so it's just one of those like, whenever someone like Del Bigtree is spouting off information. It's kind of like when Ben Shapiro or PragerU does it. Most of the time, if you take a look at what their sources are, they are not credible whatsoever. Either they say the opposite of what they're being claimed to have said, or they're simply being taken out of context, or the source is unreliable, or so on and so forth. And you can look into it if you want, but the point is he knows that people aren't going to do that. So if he spouts the names of 10 doctors, it sounds like the scientific consensus is behind him and that all these smart people agree with him, and that's the point. He's not trying to demonstrate the evidence, he's trying to demonstrate the appearance of evidence. I forget the name of it. It's a term it's like as opposed to like direct route processing, I think is what it's called, where you can appraise the information on your own because you have the wherewithal to understand it. And there's, I think, peripheral route processing, where you're relying on how someone comes off, like the confidence, the citations from people who are supposedly respected, or the credentials that seem appropriate. He's just trying to bring that type of stuff in because he doesn't have anything that would convince someone who's able to process the data on their own. As we saw, like with the data he was willing to put up on screen for us to look at, like even I could see through the trickery being done there. And something I forgot to mention is I was looking at it saying, oh, 1995 was when Andrew Wakefield's scare started, and like when he like released his paper and was going on the news and all this stuff. So people 20 years of age or younger would have been within that period, since the numbers he was looking at were from 2015. But then it occurred to me, people don't get their MMR vaccine when they're infants or when they're newborns. They get them after, like when they're toddlers, I believe it is, like 3 or 4. So even a little bit older than that, maybe up to like 25 might be like a more reasonable cutoff. And once you include that much of the portion, then no, way more of the percentage of people were born after the vaccine scare started than before. This is just another way we're like, oh wait, no, he's actually being more dishonest than we thought here.
And it's just not. Let's look at the list of people that he brings up in order to support his claim.
Oh, we are going to go
So
over.
here's
All right,
what
let's see.
we have. We have Peter McCullough, world-renowned heart doctor, saying, I
He's a
seeing the rise in
cardiologist
myocarditis.
being cited as someone who knows about vaccines. Cardiology is not related to that, I don't think. But all right, maybe he. Well, I'll let Dr. Wilson do
because
the
of this
debunking.
vaccine.
Peter McCullough has actually been stripped of his board certification
Nice.
because of the nonsense he has been spreading about COVID-19. And for good reason. He's been spreading genuine COVID-19 nonsense the entire pandemic. I've made several videos featuring him.
If you are the kind of person who is like, oh, these people are being silenced and this is the evidence of the censorship, you really want to address that, go watch these videos that Dr. Wilson is putting up on his screen right now. I know people won't do that, but because it's easier to just say, see, they're being silenced or whatever, but maybe there's good reason for this. The same way that Andrew Wakefield was stripped of his credentials for good reason.
And his bogus claims. But just to give you a quick idea of what kind
Though, of course, for the conspiracy minded, while I look at that and say, doesn't that make you uncomfortable that all the people who support your position are discredited cranks? I guess the conspiracy minded would generally look at that and say, oh, they're just trying to tear us down because we challenge the system. It's the nebulous they who's trying to oppress. So I guess it's self-insulating, I suppose. But I don't know. I just hope enough doubts can be sown that anyone who's on board for this can start to see all the cracks that exist in this supposedly sturdy position.
person he is. He now sells supplements that are supposed to treat myocarditis caused by COVID vaccines. Oh.
It reminds me a little bit of Andrew Wakefield selling his own separate version of the MMR vaccine as 3 separate doses, because after creating a scare about the combination of them. Notice how they're also always follow up their crankery and their lies with trying to sell a product for a scare they invented.
But wait, there's more. Peter soon realized that most of his audience are anti-vaxxers and have not taken COVID vaccines. So, how's he going to sell more supplements to his audience that has not taken the thing that it is said to treat? Simple. Make up the idea that COVID vaccines can spread from person to person. Yep.
Wow.
He's on record saying that COVID vaccines shed from one person to another. How does mRNA, which...
That was Del Bigtree's first source, or first big guy who agrees with him. Remember, he called top officials in their field, not crank who thinks vaccines can spread like a contagion.
Does not replicate. Jump from one person to another. It doesn't. He's just making things up. That's just fake expert number 1.
We have the leading ICU, second most published science, Paul Marik. Hear me out here. Hear me out.
Second most published critical.
Oh, I'm hearing you, Del. And you're endorsing Paul Marik, who still to this day thinks that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are effective treatments for COVID-19, despite several randomized controlled trials showing that neither of those medications do anything for COVID.
But no, of course, that's where the conspiracism comes out again, where they say, oh, they're trying to cover up. It is effective, yada, yada. But no, of course not. Yeah.
That's fake expert number 2.
Dr. Robert Malone, part of the inventing factor behind the mRNA vaccine. All these people have been censored. They were shut down. They were kept from talking.
It sounds, of the mRNA vaccine, my guess is he was not involved with the creation of the COVID vaccine, and instead about other mRNA vaccines, or how to create a vaccine using mRNA. But he says the mRNA vaccine as an attempt to be he was part of the group that was working on this specific vaccine, so he knows what he's talking about. My guess is no, he doesn't. And if he were on that board, if he were in that team, he should have been making his concerns known then, not after the fact, so he can shill his whatever garbage he's shilling that I'm sure we'll get to.
The people in Washington.
My boy Bobby Malone is not an inventor of mRNA anything.
Oh.
He did not do any of the work
just
to
lying.
make mRNA stable enough in the human body to act as a vaccine. He did not do any of the work to make the lipid nanoparticle component safer to use in humans. He didn't do any of that. I already made a video about Robert Malone's appearance.
Again, Del Bigtree viewers, does that bother you that he is lying to you about that kind of shit? Probably not, right?
It's on the Joe Rogan podcast. So if you want more details on him and his nonsense, I recommend you check that out. So yeah, that's fake expert number 3, and I think you're getting the point. Also, none of these people were actually censored. In fact, they were really loud, and even today, they are still getting audiences in front of Congress. How is that censored? It's not.
Yeah, of course. No, censorship is because Facebook took them down. But like talking to Congress, that's less speech than not censorship. That's not being allowed to speak. But Facebook taking down your obvious lies, that's censorship. Yeah, of
He
course.
put together the Great Barrington Declaration, which was an approach towards this to say, let's protect that simple small group that we know needs to be protected, and figure out a way the rest of us can establish a herd.
It's hard to
immunity
hear the
around
lies
them.
again.
So yeah, here Dell is talking about the people on the right-hand side of that panel, like Dr. Sunetra Gupta, Jay Bhattacharya, Martin Kulldorff, authors of this Great Barrington Declaration, which was not a plan. It was simply a document saying, we don't need to close down the economy, just let her rip. Let COVID spread unabated across the population, and we'll figure out how to protect the vulnerable. We don't know how, but we'll figure it out. I mean, let's just think about this for a minute. The declaration offered no details on how to identify those who are vulnerable. Is a pregnant woman vulnerable? Yes. Is someone with asthma vulnerable? Yes. Someone with no obvious risk factors? Yeah. They could still be at risk of COVID. Maybe not death, but there's also hospitalization, there's long COVID, things you don't want to happen to you. The second obvious problem here is even if you could identify everybody who was vulnerable to COVID, you're not going to protect them by just letting the virus spread across the communities. If an infectious virus is making it...
This is why, by the way, people like Del Bigtree will make up that shit about natural immunity being better than vaccines, is because he knows that he's fighting against vaccines, but he doesn't have a solution for the rampant spread, so he has to say like, oh, it's fine, you'll like be better protected or whatever. Like, sure, you might die, but if you don't die, it's better for you. That's why this kind of thing comes up. Where it's all motivated. It's one of those. It's like you have to look at how a person approaches things. He didn't look at the evidence and then come to the conclusion. He had a motivation to find a reason why his position isn't bad, and he came up with that one. It's motivated reasoning is what it's called.
To families, workplaces, schools, daycares, you're not going to be protecting the vulnerable.
Like, oh my god. And I'd like to note, look at the... Oh my god. Never mind.
They'll be at more risk because...
Like, how the hell does Illinois have more cases than New York? I wonder if there's like something that's different about the demographics of people in Illinois, maybe politically or in their interest of getting a vaccine. I wonder if there's like a difference between these kinds of people and why there are more cases in this much less populated state than in literally New York. Wonder if there's a difference there. But who knows, right? It's probably coincidence, right?
Because there's more community transmission. And even if you were able to, say, take the vulnerable and push them somewhere else, then they still have to re-enter society eventually. And whenever they do, the virus is still going to be there.
They'll die, so they won't have to.
Because this Great Barrington Declaration, if you went through with it, the virus would not go away. It would become endemic to a high degree. What I mean by that is essentially what we have seen with every infectious disease in the past that you essentially don't deal with. You get wave after wave of infection influenced by factors like immunity waning and introducing new immunologically naive people to the population that the virus can then colonize and spread around in. With vaccines, you obviously don't eliminate the virus. That was never claimed to be a goal of vaccines.
But the anti-vaxxers will scream that it is, so now people are forced to defend the claim that was never made.
You reduce the death and the hospitalization and the actual impact on the healthcare system.
And as a note, like the people who are against the vaccine, why is that not good enough? Why is it not good enough that people aren't dying as much? What, because of a harm you can't demonstrate exists for a group of people you can't identify? That's why it's not like, no, we can't let these people possibly be harmed, because just to prevent them from dying. Isn't that so much worse that they could be harmed instead of dying? Yeah, it's nonsense.
That the virus causes. That's kind of the whole point. And with the Great Barrington Declaration,
Oh, sorry. I should look more in detail at this chart here. Death rate by vaccination status. Oh, interesting. how the where the if you're unvaccinated, you're far more likely to die from COVID even now. Isn't that wild? Deaths per 100,000 way higher if you are unvaccinated, and then vaccinated without the booster or with the booster is pretty similar. But unvaccinated entirely, way more likely to die. I guess that's not good enough, right?
That the virus causes. That's kind of the whole point. And with the Great Barrington Declaration, you obviously would also have a lot of infections, but you have a lot more death. And we want to prevent death, right? Yeah, that seems like a good goal. Great Barrington Declaration didn't want to do that. So, of course, it was ignored and smacked down by scientists. It's like if you're at a work meeting and someone says, hey, how about we take all that money that we're going to give our employees for bonuses and instead invest it into waffles? Invest it into lots and lots of waffles. You're going to say, no, that's dumb. It's just
and
one
then
of
they'll
those...
cry about being censored and why is nobody addressing the waffle question, and people don't even want to talk to me, and did you know that waffles cure cancer? And then you know, in an interview where you don't have access to countervailing information, you can't contest that, so they get to say waffles cure cancer and this doctor couldn't disprove it, you know.
those ideas that had absolutely
That's what the vaccine debate is like, for what it's worth.
no basis in reality. So they didn't really go far in the scientific community. And then the people like Koldorf and Bhattacharya got upset when their ideas were not accepted by their peers.
And by the way, all the scientists I just showed proved to be right. They told you that this virus, that the vaccine would not end this and would actually cause an endemic, because you've now made people that cannot clear this virus and kill it. They're all asymptomatic carriers. That's all this vaccine keeps doing. So
This, by the way, like, look at
clear this
Neil
virus
deGrasse
and kill
Tyson's
it.
face.
They're all asymptomatic.
He's clearly like, I'm off it. This guy's like just so full of lies, and it's probably the kind of stuff that he's addressed. That, sorry, maybe not he's addressed, but is addressed in that documentary that's coming out. And it's just like a lot of the responses he didn't have, I do attribute to like the understanding of who he's talking to and what the position he's in, and just being like, it's not worth it. And I kind of get it, but I'm sorry, you're there. You have a responsibility to at least make an effort. You did sometimes, but you should have been more prepared. Unfortunately, preparation is difficult, but you should have had like a consultant who's like, all right, I know how to debate dishonest losers like this guy. Let's get into it.
Carriers. That's all this vaccine keeps doing.
So now we're getting into some of the claims that Neil could have smacked down very easily with some evidence. What Del just said there is stupid.
Yeah,
we
of
have
course.
plenty of data showing that when you're vaccinated,
Hey, look, more data that if you're unvaccinated, you're far more at risk. This is CT value, day of illness. Oh, okay. Yeah, it just seems like it's much, much worse if you're unvaccinated. I'm gonna pause on that note because like that's something that anti-vaxxers seem to just completely permute out of the conversation. They just don't talk about it at all. They just don't. They don't want to address it. They'll move on to other stuff. They'll be like, yeah, but like this thing I made up will happen to you. Okay, but you didn't die.
vaccinated against SARS-CoV-2.
Even if that were true, and it's not.
You're going to clear the virus faster than someone who is unvaccinated.
Oh, look, a direct refutation. And of course, like, yeah, of course, yeah, there's data on both sides. Like, there's data on both sides of, like, the evolution creation debate. Like, okay, like, I don't know. You're going to tell me, like, okay, all of this information is fake?
This is thanks to an immune memory response that kicks in, produces antibodies and immune cells that are going to neutralize and clear the virus, and in the process make you less likely to actually...
Oh, and by the way, I do note that when that data never comes up. The data on both sides, as it were. Like, Del could have brought that up. He had access to all this information. He had his list of 10 doctors that he was going to trot out, but he didn't have data about any of the harms, or he's just going to spout off his nonsense. He's not going to attempt to demonstrate it. It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Actually get sick or die. And
why doesn't that
really
data
the whole
ever come
point
up
of vaccines? And that's what
other than by illusion
they have done here.
The study that needs to be done is a comparative study. you could throw your measles and the safety of measles and whether it causes autism studies on the table, and I could show very robust studies that show the exact opposite.
You wouldn't show a consensus.
Huh?
You wouldn't show a consensus.
I don't care about the consensus.
Oh, yeah.
And like, yeah, so and that's another thing, right? So Del is now like he's going back to the measles vaccine thing, right? We were talking about COVID, but I guess we're going to talk about the measles thing in that moment. Like, there are papers that exist, but just because they exist doesn't mean they have good data. You can read Andrew Wakefield's paper and you can see, oh, he says at the end that there's a link, but if you look into it at all, you'll see that it's complete nonsense. So just because the data exists doesn't mean that it is was derived from good means and good methods. That's why peer review is important. That's why consensus is important. But instead he'll just like say, he'll allude to this being a thing, even though the data says otherwise.
Yeah, did I mention that Del Bigtree thinks that vaccines cause autism? Because he thinks that vaccines cause autism. And Neil is absolutely right.
Oh, and by the way, the link between vaccines and autism, very important to note. Again, not true. And even if it was, it's not really that big a deal because being autistic is fine. But beyond all of that, the link between the two was actually not demonstrated. Andrew Wakefield claimed to have a link between the MMR vaccine in combination and autism, but separately for unknown reasons that he could never explain. Separately, he said they were okay, and that got extrapolated past what he agreed with to just saying all vaccines cause autism, because people like this are conspiracists, not scientists.
Del could show a absolute garbage tier study showing that maybe there's an association between autism and vaccines, but it would not represent a consensus because we have several well-designed, huge investigative trials showing that vaccines convincingly do not cause autism. And then Del's response is oh so appropriate, that he doesn't care about the consensus. Of course he doesn't.
Right.
He only cares about his propaganda,
correct,
like I said. He is not interested in science. He's not interested in the facts.
No, of course.
All he cares about is pushing his predetermined message. That's all.
CDC sits on a database called the VSD.
Yep.
Has nearly 10 million people in it. Their personal identification is scrubbed. It's where all the studies are done. The Institute of Medicine studied that data set and said that you have tens of thousands of unvaccinated individuals in there. You could do a very powerful, statistically powerful study comparing the vaccinated to the completely unvaccinated.
So,
and ask simple questions.
Write the proposal to do it.
We have.
Okay.
NIH denies us.
My guy, if you look on that very page, there's a link. If you click that link, you can find a long list of studies throughout the years that have been done using that data set. And
so he was also lying about the studies that he wished to see directly to Neil's face. Does his audience have a problem with that? I mean, obviously they don't know that, but a cursory glance can show you can find this information.
Recent ones is looking at all-cause mortality in COVID vaccinated versus COVID unvaccinated individuals.
It really implies to me that given that all these studies exist, his proposal must have been really unreasonable if there are already a lot of studies using this data, and the one he proposed was rejected for being unactionable.
And guess what? COVID vaccinated individuals have a lower all-cause mortality rate than unvaccinated individuals. In other words, unvaccinated individuals die more often than vaccinated individuals. Del might not be able to read, but at least he entertains us.
And that's just why is that fact never wrestled with by people like this, by like anti-vaxxers? Why do they never contend with the fact that unvaccinated people die way more than vaccinated people from COVID? Why is that not relevant to them? I'm guessing my answer to that is because they don't care. But I mean, being that if reckoning with that, not caring about that, I don't know. It feels like it should be something that bothers a person a bit. I mean, with Del Bigtree, I mean, he's obviously a dishonest grifter. It doesn't matter. He doesn't care. He'll say whatever he has to say to fund his studio so he can make more money or whatever. He doesn't give a shit. Actually, now I'm curious. Wonder net worth $1 to $5 million. Okay. It's not like it's not like extreme or whatever, but that money came from somewhere.
I think we have shown here is that
this is nice and cold.
it is nice and cold.
Oh my gosh, it's like 33 degrees.
We are not some radical group of people. We are trying to stand for the small guy, the little guy, the part that's being left out of the consensus.
It looks to me like Neil is just totally done with Dell here.
Oh yeah, and he had been for a while at that point.
Dell, you are a radical group of wackos. You are not fighting for the little guy. You're fighting for the opposite. You are fighting for policies that are ultimately going to harm the little guy the most. You don't truly fight for vaccine victims. You parade them as trophies in your propaganda campaign. You don't truly fight for safer vaccines. You ignore science and fight against vaccines, period. You fight against evidence-based public health policies. You fight against saving lives. It's despicable, and you should be ashamed of yourself. Your nonsense, Dell, is so easy to debunk. All it took was clicking on a link in your own darn screenshot. Now, as a viewer, you're probably wondering, would I debate Dell?
Yeah, really well said. Yeah, completely agree with all of that. I don't really have anything to say about it so much as I want to like highlight how poignant that was. He's right.
Bigtree. Yes, I would. Not on his platform, though. I wouldn't go on his show where he controls the narrative and the context of whatever is said.
Yeah.
No, I'll debate him happily on a neutral platform where I know the format, and we can agree on predetermined topics to discuss. And that's what I would recommend to any other scientist who might be interested in debating someone like Del Bigtree. That includes your friends, Neil. Give them this advice. And if you want a more fleshed out version of this kind of advice, I recommend you read Dr. David Gorski's article on this episode of Del Bigtree's show. I'll put the link to that, as well as all of the other science that I talked about in this video, in the description below, so that you can actually, read the science and be smarter than Del Bigtree, which is not hard, I promise.
Given that there are these links in the description here, I'm going to put a link to this video in my description. Just go take a look. I'm not going to go through all of it myself, in large part because a lot of it's going to be over my head, I think. But, if you want to appraise the data presented here, I'll just put that in the description real quick. Just give me one moment. Let me put a little hole. Just want to get all the information there and do it before I forget. So y'all will just sit here while I do this. Okay. Done and done.
Well, I think that's going to do it for this week's video. Like I said, the links are in the description if you want to read more science. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to like it and subscribe so that you can...
That's a good idea. We're going to do these things. I think what I'll do, because it would be interesting, he's a small enough content creator. I mean, I'm saying this with my less than 30 subscribers. I just mean like he's not an enormous content creator, so it seems like more accessible. Maybe I'll reach out to him and ask him if he'd like to come on. We can talk about stuff, because he does seem very knowledgeable and quite insightful about a lot of this stuff, and it'd be interesting to talk to him about it. So I think off stream I'll reach out to him, see if there's if he has like an email I can do that for. So we'll see if we can't talk to him. That'd be nice to start interacting with other people on the line instead of just talking to my audience. So I'll leave this open for that exact reason. But but before we do that, that'll happen all off stream. I hope that was interesting for all. Oh no, don't tell me I won't be able to find. No, I want to see the full thing. All right, I'm gonna look elsewhere for this. Maybe it's on Fox's website or something. But to the next thing of the day is is it really only an 8-minute interview? Okay, we'll start here. Next up, oh, what is? Oh, is this because it's through YouTube? Okay, yeah. Oh no, this is covering it from The View. How is it this hard to simply get to watch the interview directly? Which this also isn't it? Why is it so hard to find? Is it on their website? Oh, please. Oh my god. Fine. Oh my god. Well, that is obnoxious. Alright, so we're gonna have to go through these clips. That's pretty annoying. I was just gonna watch the interview, but it seems like that is inaccessible. So we'll do this for a little bit, and we'll. All right, so maybe a couple of these clips. So let's take a look. But yeah, I hope the vaccine discussion was interesting to people, and I'll reach out to Dr. Wilson to see if he wants to talk about it with me, because I think that would be very interesting. I don't know how reasonable that is to expect, considering I'm basically a nothing channel, but maybe he'd be interested. If we can, I think we could have a very worthwhile conversation about that. And I hope this whole escapade into vaccine discussion was interesting to people. I found it very interesting, and I learned about this Del Bigtree guy who is, yeah, piece of work. But that all being said, we can move on. Donald Trump interviewed on Fox. I heard it was interesting. So let's see if we can get out of these clips maybe this TYT. Oh, it seems like there's a lot of conversation. I just want to see the interview. Is it really that difficult?
Is first TV interview since his indictment #2 last week.
The only way NARA could ever get this back, would be please, could we have it back?
And they
please,
asked for that.
because they have no. We
they
were
did
talking.
Ask for it.
No, and
they said,
I gave
"Can you
them
give the documents back?"
And we were talking.
And then they said.
So now he's claiming that NARA doesn't have the authority to ask for the documents back, or like, even though he knows that he was subpoenaed for them. And what?
DOJ to subpoena you to get them
Which
back.
they've never done before.
Right.
But
why not just hand them over then?
Because I had boxes. I want to go through the boxes and get all my personal.
Then why were you
things
hiding
out.
them?
I don't want to.
Right, he's lying again. We know now because we read the indictment that he's lying about this. He was hiding the boxes. It wasn't that just that he wanted to go through them. He had the opportunity to go through them. He didn't do that. Instead, he was secreting them out of Mar-a-Lago, even under the nose of his own lawyer, so that he could keep these boxes that he knew he wasn't supposed to have.
That over
he's lying again.
Yet. And I was very busy, as you've sort of seen.
Yeah, but
I've
according to
been
the
very, very
indictment,
busy.
you then tell this aide to move to other locations after telling your lawyers to say you'd fully complied with the subpoena when you hadn't.
But before I send boxes over, I have to take all of my things out. These boxes were interspersed with all sorts of things.
No, he's not addressing what's being
Bret
said.
Baier, Fox News chief political anchor and anchor of Special Report,
All right.
joins us now by phone on his way back into New York after this interview. Bret, what was your takeaway from your talk with the president?
How is it this difficult? All right. You know what I'll do? Hold on. I'm gonna go back to Fox News for a second. I'm probably gonna put us on here. We're gonna I'll be here, but I'm gonna be right back, as it were. I'll keep talking to y'all so you hear my lovely voice, because I'll see if I can like sign into my whatever I need to in order to...
Trump wrapped his first TV interview since his indictment number 2.
Whatever I need to in order to get access to this video. I don't think I have any of these things. Is it? Oh, I think we have DirecTV. It's a very weird and convoluted way to access this. I just want to... I just want to watch your stupid video. How hard is that? I just don't want to like put any information out there that okay, hold on. Maybe might actually be able to access this. This is very frustrating. Why can't we just watch things? Why can't we have nice things? Oh, right. Okay. Gotta go like find the password for all this stuff, and that's why I'm not showing it on my stream so you can just hear me. But it seems worthwhile. Simply for the fact that it seems impossible to get access to this interview in any full way. Alright. Does this work? What do you mean it doesn't? Well, this is disappointing. I was hoping I didn't think that this was going to be the point of contention. Normally these things are pretty accessible, but in this case it seems not. Is this the same? This is the same news clip. Then why was it a different news clip? The things I do for you, my loyal viewer. Alright, this isn't working. Very sorry, not going to be able to get it this way. So we're just going to have to get a bunch of clips. Oh, that's annoying. Oh, that's very annoying. Alright, let's see if we can't find some other clips. Let's see, is this the one we just watched? No, this is... nope. Okay, this is, yeah, not going to have the thing there.
Trump wrapped his first TV interview since his...
Oh, okay, this is the same thing. Alright, maybe it's... Okay, this one we hadn't seen yet. Or at least we're getting distinct clips. Wow, that's really disappointing. I was really hoping to watch the entire interview, but it seems like you gotta, like, subscribe to Fox or whatever else, what I don't really want to do.
Bret Baier scoring an exclusive interview with former President Donald Trump and grilling the GOP 2024 race.
Would be please, could we have it back?
And they
please,
asked for that.
because they have no...
Okay, we saw this part.
Yeah, whereas to say you things out. These...
Bret,
is that really
what's the thing
all that anyone's talking about? There's gotta be. Oh man, that is upsetting. Does this maybe have at least a different clip? What is up with my internet? It's not normally this slow.
We put people in that were great, and we put people in that weren't. I now know Washington probably better than anybody. I know the good ones and the bad ones, and we will have really great, strong people. I already know who they are, but we will have really great, strong people. Okay. In 2016, you said that. I'm going to surround myself with only the best and most serious people.
Yeah, and then he went on to fire
I was prepping for this,
everyone.
I was thinking about some of the people in the administration. Bret Baier will...
And you gotta
I just want to see the interview. I just want to see the interview. How hard is that? All right, is that all we're gonna get? Everyone has like their 3-second clip, and that's it. All right. Well, it seems we're not gonna get any more off of that. That's pretty annoying. I guess we'll just wrap up there. I'll reach out to. Thankfully, we got some really interesting stuff from this video with Dr. Wilson. I'll reach out to him. Maybe he'd be interested in talking with me. I think he'd be a good person to talk to about this stuff. Hopefully the vaccine stuff has been interesting to y'all, and I think maybe tomorrow we'll do a debate review. We'll find a cool one to go over. I did see one that was really interesting to me. It was again an instance of these like pseudo-logical arguments against trans people being their identified gender. It was Vosh and someone I was unfamiliar with. The problem is it's like 3 hours, and if at the rate we watch things, that'll take multiple days to go over. It was really interesting to me at least, but for the most part it's the same kind of thing as we saw in the Dr. Bregardis debate. So maybe we won't do that one, but we'll find something. That said, I hope this all was interesting for you, and I hope you found it interesting. I think I just said that twice because I'm rambling, but I hope you found it of value. There you go. That's the phrase I wanted. And I'll reach out to Dr. Wilson. So thanks so much for watching. Have a good one. Bye now.